An excerpt from Interminable Wars versus Utopia Options, copyright 2010. July 19, 2010, Halliburton's Army and the $3 Trillion War. These are two books that I read recently. Free corporations from slavery and buying of stock shares of these fiction individuals, that is, corporations. If a corporation treated legally as an individual isn't a collective, then what is it? Perhaps joint partnerships should be the largest communal business form to be legally allowed to exist, such that when people, partners, A plus B plus C plus D plus E, spill oil, they are sued and go out of business because they have financial responsibility instead of individual collective. Big A is sued for spilling oil, yet the owners of it have no personal financial responsibility as a corporation, though the stock value may or may not suffer. Well, more of this subject later. The economic future of the United States is under assault from a number of directions, including Mexico, the broadcast media, and corporatism. Reading Pradip Chatterjee's 2009 book, Halliburton's Army, on these tens of thousands of people working abroad in construction projects and providing services to fulfill U.S. government contracts pertaining to war missions, often of a protracted nature, I found new information to fill out some of the details of the more general work I had recently read. The $3 Trillion War, co-authored by a winner of the Nobel Prize for Economics, named Stiglitz, on the Iraq and Afghan financial swamp, devastating the U.S. economy. There are many historical evolutionary business elements involved in the private business contracting for each war. Too many to review here. I suggest reading each book. Yet certain points exist regarding the phenomena of globalism, corporatism, and corruption that may be cited or considered briefly. The Brown and Root Corporation, owned for a while by Halliburton, has been involved in vast military construction projects since the Vietnam War. They were part of a consortium that built 95% of large U.S. military bases in Vietnam. Halliburton, Brown and Root was the largest contractor in the Iraq-Afghanistan conflicts as well. From helping LBJ get his start in politics, and vice versa in contracting, to Dick Cheney, the Halliburton-KBR relationships were too cozy, comprising a conflict of interest and possibly a draft toward war for the profit of private interests. My concern here is simply with the phenomena of corporatism upon U.S. employment and environmental interests, rather than in recounting the history of corruption of Halliburton and Brown and Root, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, of which I was once a member briefly in training, log cap, the naval equivalent, or so forth, Pentagon procurements or awarding of contracts, etc. Much of the employment by Halliburton KBR contractors abroad goes to TCNs or third country nationals. Even Guantanamo Bay was built by flown in Philippine workers, paid $2.50 an hour, and then sent back to Manila, almost on a sealed transport through the San Francisco airport, where they couldn't leave the plane or the airport. U.S. taxpayers pay huge amounts of money to fund private contractor developments in support of military deployments abroad in areas of conflict, and instead of hiring Americans or locals getting the jobs, much of the time TCNs are hired because they are the cheapest or safest and produce the most profit for the ostensible U.S. contractor. Halliburton relocated its headquarters to Dubai. The degree of corruption in granting military support contracts is substantial, and perhaps itself comprises a reason for war, if not for assassinating presidents who would not kick back so well to particular corporations. These protracted war and nation rebuilding missions abroad kick back product purchases to several American food corporations as well as other suppliers. The phenomena creates a political draft for continuity of the phenomena. Corporatism is something like socialism, yet it is not as fair regarding lower-level distribution of wages. Corporatism and foreign war contracting may also supply startup foreign corporations that bribe contract awarding officials with a percentage of future profits, and these foreign corporations later become influential upon U.S. interests. Large multinational corporations that influence U.S. politicians in a variety of ways conform to a phenomenon of corporatism. The poor and unemployed in the United States are lent for both major political parties, as is the environment. Unfortunately, simple human corruption and greed in and out of government are the heart of the problem. With the primary broadcast media owned by powers of concentrated wealth, the basic power agency of propaganda is unchallenged. U.S. nationalism is degraded along with the environment. Without a political rectification towards smaller business, ecologically renewable, free enterprise nationalism, the future of the United States is that of being exploited by globalist concentrated wealth and power. The Democratic Party has lost interest in really supporting new private sector employment for the poor and those out of work for the longest time first. The Republican Party and right-wing talk radio speak out against big government. When in political power, some conservative politicians such as Dick Cheney acted as if they felt entitled to take out their contempt for big government by giving big contracts to corporate firms with special interests that help them politically, that have been friendly to their career interests in the past. For some reason, dumping huge multi-billion-dollar contracts to the private sector on the public credit card is considered to be thumbing the nose at big government. Such conservatives divert investment capital abroad, create vast public debt, and reduce social services to the poor in the United States. There is another downside to this military-industrial conservative deficit spending for protracted, corrupt, inept nation rebuilding that is mostly unknown in the USA. There is a pervasive two-scale pay system for these contractors working on U.S. military projects abroad. Chatterjee writes on page 144 of Halliburton's contract, quote, "In fact, salaries of TNCs were tied to country of origin. Thus, a Bangladeshi cleaner would be paid less than a Pakistani, a Georgian truck driver more than a Fijian, and a white South African security guard would make more than an Indian for doing the very same job. The poorer the country of citizenship, the less the workers were paid, which is not unlike the caste system in India or the apartheid system in South Africa before the African National Congress came to power," unquote. And the practice of paying third country nationals far less than U.S. workers to produce profit is, of course, at the heart of corporate capitalism of a Spencerian kind. Americans generally know that since the end of the Cold War, they face more laboring challenges from abroad. Instead of competing against 3 workers, they compete against 10 individually. Americans working abroad may not be allowed to do dirty work because it might make the TNCs restive for higher equal wages in the right belief that the Americans are not superior doing equal work. That could lead to a reduction in corporate profits. In the long run, such practices may lead to increased popular bias globally against U.S. citizens generally. I believe that a new era of nationalism, of an ecological economic nature, is the direction the United States should go. For most of my life, I've just done unskilled or semi-skilled manual labor such as house repainting, and I enjoy gardening and nature and would be too happy to transition to a less wasteful national economy and world trading regime in which the transfer of natural resources over international borders is done for reasons of comparative ecological interest rather than for temporal fiduciary advantage of exploitative individuals through transnational corporations. Corporations are not mentioned in the U.S. Declaration of Independence nor Constitution, and fundamentally there is no reason why they should be granted a legal fiction status as individuals of an immortal nature. They could at least be limited in the size of employees to 3,000, and citizens could be limited to investing in ownership of just 3 legal fiction individual corporations each in order to prevent legal fictions from the ownership of real American opportunities that through sheer financial and economic power and networking exclude Americans from equal opportunity and free enterprise opportunities in the United States. If corporations are even fiction individuals, they should be protected from being bought and sold through stock offerings as if they were slaves anyway. Though it is a silly legal theory, the Emancipation Proclamation might be applied to the fiction individuals too, and corporations finally given their freedom with nobody owning them anymore. The Democratic Party led by President Obama is continuing these foreign financial fiascos in Afghanistan and Iraq that will continue as long as their American taxpayers allowing foreign and concentrated wealth loans to pay for government. The opportunity costs for diverting investment capital abroad are immense. The fundamental profiteers from these foreign expenditures are corrupt cadres of corporate contractors. The profits, foreign and Muslim-led corporations profiting from these oil sales and wars are also huge. And that was the end of this excerpt from Interminable Wars versus Utopia Options.